It is December 15th, which means that I don't have a job until the new year, which means it's time for a 10-second review of every book that I read this year. I read 53. This is going to take quite a few days, and it's not going to be fun. Remember that this order is going generally from worst to generally from the best. I do not intend to argue. I wish not to argue, and I will not argue. And if you're wondering where the 30 Danielle Steele books that I read this year are, remember that today I'm starting with the worst ones. Which means near the bottom of the bottom is The Maid by Nita Prose. This book was terrible. I would not suggest it to anyone, and I found it personally offensive. I call it Big Bang Theory syndrome. I want to write autism tropes, but I know that that's not actually what autism is. But I really want to. So I just write the tropes and then I never use the word autism. So if anyone says, hey, that's... And then I can say, oh, but I didn't... Oh, hey, look at the time. It's time for a 10-second review of The Moral Problem by Michael Smith. When I tell people I care about philosophy, I'm sure they think, wow, that's a bunch of boring books that no one should care about and don't mean anything. And I say, no, they actually do. This is a boring book about nothing that doesn't mean anything. Worst class I ever took. I just fell asleep and then I woke up and it was time for a 10-second review of Signifying Rappers by David Foster Wallace and Mark Costello. I think I tweeted way back, just because you heard a song on the radio, you shouldn't write an 80-page book. Anyways, I like the idea of postmodernism, but I don't like the phrase purple prose. Neither of us want this, but it's time for a 10-second review of Franz Kafka's The Trial. I like brutalist architecture, but reading this makes me feel like how I feel people who hate brutalist architecture feel. Yeah. I should go to sleep and so should you, but anyways, it's time for a 10-second review of Humor by Terry Eagleton. A book on the philosophy and theory of humor shouldn't be funny. And they kept saying, oh, it's funny. And it wasn't funny. And that's not funny, but it does make you think. And this wasn't funny, but it didn't make... It's December 16th. That's a new day. I shaved, and it's time for a new installment of me reviewing every book that I read this year. Remember, these are just my opinions, and I have no interest in arguing with you. This is going from roughly worst to roughly best. And if you're wondering why there's no Farmer's Almanac, it's because I'm actually illiterate. Let's get going. And because it's a new day, I have a bit more energy to do a 10-second review of The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. I was going to do a bit where the entire review would be one really long run-on sentence, but that would get boring after a while. My voice is shot. That means it's time for a 10-second review of Haruki Murakami's Kafka on the Shore. If you like animals... Anyways, this is on the worst side of the series, so... I'm currently out, but, The World Demands a 10-second review with the picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Here's the thing, is quippy, fun one-liners don't work in a novel, and I'm not even going to say that in a quippy one-liner way, because... That's right, you can't get rid of me. You tried, but you really can't. Now you can't get rid of a 10-second review of The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda by Ishmael Reed. It's not a play, it's not a history lecture, it's a Wikipedia article. Is it good to know? Yes. Is it a Wikipedia article? Yes. Generally, we're getting into books that I pretty much liked right now, so here's a 10-second review of a book that I pretty much liked right now. It's Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge. It's good, but I'm also not a parent or an immigrant. And I feel like if you were a parent, you wouldn't like this. And if you're a parent and you do like it, I'm going to go Google the phrase red flag because I've never heard of it before and people keep using it and I'm confused. It's December 17th and I have yet to find a sponsor, so instead, without getting paid, I'm going to do a 10-second review of a book that I read this year. Remember, this is going from generally worst to generally best. Great news if you want to argue with me about these. I don't. And remember to drink water. Lots of it. Keep drinking. Keep drinking. And now I'm going to get a lot of flack for my 10-second review of the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels. I read this quite a few years back, and now I read it again, and it is entirely underwhelming. There are far better revolutionary texts, and also there are revolutionary texts that aren't communists. And it's really hard to tell people how I feel about communists, because then I sound like it. I hate communists for different reasons than why you do. Paige Adrian just sponsored this 10-second review of The Death of Expertise. Your name can be on this list as well. This proves that even a very, very, very wrong clock can be right. TikTok, mother... We have another sponsorship for this 10-second review of Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin, brought to you by Z the Free.
It's very important.
It's very important.
10 essays.
10 essays. It is good. Some of the cultural references are lost on me. I haven't read Uncle Tom's Cabin, haven't seen some of the books. But sometimes you don't live in the closet, you live in the trunk. And that's much scarier. Wowee, those were exciting. And now it's time for an unsponsored 10-second review of What World Is This by Judith Butler. I like phenomenology. It's fun. You wouldn't think it's fun, but you're kind of boring. You're like, people don't want to tell you, but like, it's a bit of a drag. I don't think that you were prepared for a late night 10-second review of Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, but you're gonna get one anyways. There's nothing really funny. It just was pretty good. I liked it. I reread it. Fine. You'd probably like reading it. It's funny. It's interesting. Read it, probably. I know, I forgot, but you probably didn't forget that I'm doing a 10-second review of every book that I read this year, going generally from worst to generally from best. We're about in the middle right now. If you want to argue with me, wow, that's so cool for you. I love that for you. Anyways... my cat's sitting there. I'm running real rates, so let's see if we can do this. So real quick, let's do a 10-second review of Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Let me see if I can get in the headspace. The book was good. I liked the language. The bit's not funny, but... And quickly, here's a 10-second review of Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. This one seems inappropriate to make a joke about, so let's just say it was good and that you should read it. I think the best part of my day is doing this 10-second review of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Remember when I said I dropped out of a first-year English class? Hello? Did you have your supper? Did I forget that I was doing these reviews? No, you forgot that I was doing a 10-second review of Good Entertainment by Byung-Chul Han, which I took a single thing from, because I read it in a day at the library, and it was a good thing, and I'm gonna keep it and reread it, so it's gonna be on this list next year if I do one. Oh, I'm not gonna. I bet you don't know that this is a 10-second review of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, because those who think they know never learn. So you should know that. If this is your first episode, my name is Bill Murray. I have been cursed to live the same day for 1,000 years, and on that day I review every book that I read this year. This is going from generally worst to generally best. I have no interest, ability, or time to argue. And, well, I do have time. I have 8 million years, because I have lived this moment for several billion lifetimes. So this is a 10-second review of The Call of Cthulhu and Other Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. This is one of those Indigo published pulp ones. I buy those all the time. I'm addicted. They originally did a first draft of Lovecraft stories, and I read those. And then it seems like they did these ones second, and then they filled the second one with all the best famous stories. So I liked this one more. Because I'm running very, very late, I'm going to do my impression of a 10-second review of Flight to Canada by Ishmael Reed. This is one of those things that's cursed by its beautiful, beautiful premise, where it doesn't live up to the premise because the premise is so good. and it's still fine, but it's such a good premise, man. Hopefully my cats screaming don't interrupt this 10-second review of Agatha Christie's The ABC Murders. It's fine. It's Agatha Christie. I think it's really funny that the cover says, now an original series. How do you make a series out of that? Hollywood, what are you doing? I'm also opening up this series for a brief period of time for customer feedback. Throw what you think of the reviews up in that box, and remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, pay me $5, send me things in the mail. It's 7:22, which I feel is the perfect time for a 10-second review of this anthology of Next Fest plays. Let me tell you, if your parents ever ask you to go see a play, ask them if it involves eating citrus. In which case, do not see the play. Do not. It's not just about citrus. A special University of Saskatchewan sponsored 10-second review of Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. The university actually had me do this review to advertise for the now past Greystone Theatre production of Faustus. Except I didn't get the memo that I was supposed to do a British accent. If this were the time for a 10-second review of Let the Record Show by Sarah Schulman, it would be time for a serious review. A very good book, very important to know. It is only this low on the list because of how truly challenging it was. It made me question things in ways that are not comfortable, and I will be honest, that uncomfort stopped it from being higher on the list. That is my fault. It's getting pretty late here in Saskatoon, so I'm going to read you a bedtime story of a 10-second review of Unlikable Female Characters by Anna Bogoskaya. Another serious review. It was interesting when I understood the references. I haven't seen many movies, so it's not higher on the list because some of it was a bit too pop nonfiction, and some of it truly went over my head because I've seen like 5 movies ever. Happy December 20th, everybody. Now I'm going to make it an unhappy December 20th by continuing the series where I do a 10-second review of every book that I read this year. The series that the fans are calling good and saying, I like the reviews. Remember, these are going from generally worst to generally best. Today we're on pretty good. And if you don't think they're pretty good, keep it to yourself. Eventually, the Danielle Steele books will show up around now. So let's start the day off with a 10-second review of How the World Swung to the Right by François Cousset. It didn't tell me how the world swung to the right in a way that I found productive, but I did like the rest of it, so. How about this? You leave the money in the bag, and I'll give you a 10-second review of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It would be pretty good if every time a villain was like really villainous, they just got struck by lightning. Everything else was, I really liked it, but that was a bit on the nose, you know? Oh wait, for the first time in the series, I'm going to do a second 10-second review of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, because I think it's funny that I always confused Jane Eyre, the novel, with Jane Austen, the author, and now later on in the list, Jane Austen, the author, will be in there, so now I know for certain which is which, because I did my research. Bennett Lewis is sponsoring this 10-second review of Hank Green's A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. They say that you should write what you know, which is true because Hank Green's first book, which was good, he wrote what he knew. And then this second one wasn't as good because he didn't write what he knows, and I know that. So I'm going to write it down.
I'm Ben Lewis, and I approve this message.
Your suspicions are in fact correct. It is time for a 10-second review of The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. Halfway through the book, I sent Ben a text and it said, wow, it's just like a Stuart McLean story. So about Bubber. And here I bequeath unto you a 10-second review of Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. It's very post-Knives Out, but I'm here for it, actually. So, yeah. You're very smart. We all really respect that about you. But I feel like you might need reminding that I'm doing a 10-second review of every book that I read this year. Going from generally worst to generally from best. We're pretty good to very good right now. If you don't think they're pretty good to very good, don't tell me, I don't care. It's going to be a lot of on-the-go ones today, so we'll see how I do. We're getting close to the end. This is a special Broadway edition of a 10-second review of James Ellroy's The Black Dahlia. This is the only true crime I'm interested in reading, coming from the demon dog with the hog log himself. Super quick 10-second review of Afrofuturism by Natasha Womack. This is what all collections of essays should be. Happy evening, anyone, and happy 10-second review of the Laura Jane Grace book, whose title I will not say. I am also disillusioned with punk politics, Miss Grace, so I enjoyed reading this. Really, all of these reviews are special, but this is an extra special 10-second review of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. My review, the worst thing about this book is that Mary Cat doesn't exist, and we can't fall in love and be agoraphobes together. And everything else about it was almost perfect. 10-second review of Ionesco's The Bald Soprano and Other Plays. These plays are good. I feel like I would say they are goated with the sauce. The fans have they begged me for a 10-second review of Laughing with the Trickster by Thompson Highway. All Massey lectures are good, actually, and this one especially. You should read all of them. The Astor Taylor one is coming up. Sneak peek. Happy December 22nd, everybody. December 22nd means that I only have 2 more days in my self-imposed schedule to do a 10-second review of every book that I read this year. This started from worst to best. We are now at best, and I want to thank the 5 people who watch these. I see the numbers. I know that this is just for me. I told myself I would do this. I'm making myself do this. I think that my top books here contain a lot of books that a lot of people know, but this is a 10-second review of Ridley Walker by Russell Hoban. This one I hadn't heard of. Shoutouts, Gabe. Impossible to read, and then when it's possible to read, it's impossible to stop thinking about. I don't know about you, but I feel like this afternoon is the perfect time for a 10-second review of The Vinyl Cafe Celebrates by Stuart McLean. It's December. It's Stuart McLean. What more do you people want? Time for a 10-second review of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I don't read funny books. They don't make me laugh. Anyways, remember when I said this is the best end of the list? It'd be good if I didn't say anything that was factually incorrect. Happy evening, everybody. It's time for a happy 10-second review of Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. It's not high literature, but I feel better, so. Howdy, gamer and gamerettes. It's time for a 10-second review of The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I personally found the part where she overdosed after failing to have an artistic career and disappeared for quite some time to be very unrealistic. Welcome to the late night edition of the last night of 10-second reviews with this 10-second review of The Age of Insecurity by Astra Taylor. This is nonfiction that treats you as an intellectual equal, and oh boy, is she someone to be an equal with. You already know what's happening. I read books. Now I'm reviewing books. We're at the best of the books. There are going to be longer reviews today because some of them I have a message. And then you can never hear me review a book again. And the crowd applauds. So to start things off, here's a maybe longer than 10-second review of Dillatime by Don Charnas. I think that sometimes celebrity culture just kind of, there's a little bit about me that for some reason makes me feel a bit weird or uncomfortable. And I feel like this book does a great job of showing that the famous people, the geniuses who create their people, and there's a mythology around them, and that sometimes that mythology dehumanizes them. And I don't know if that means we have to reject celebrity culture, but I think that we need to think about our relationships with fame. Before I get on to the top 5 books, which interchangeable with the last 10 books, all great. First, there's an honorable mention 10-second review of Avicenna and the Aristotelian Right by Ernst Bloch. The only book I read this year that I do not own, and I do not feel bad about that. The amount that I do not care about Neoplatonic thought, the amount that one of the last classes I took in university was taught by one of my favorite profs, and it just the amount that I no. Again, we are in the top 5, so this is a more than 10-second review of Michelle Good's 5 Little Indians. What does fiction... Why do we have fiction? Because I believe that we have fiction for more than just telling stories, but we have stories that can tell things that just speaking, that just text can't. And I believe that the story of 5 Little Indians is exceptional, and I believe that the things it teaches you are... If you are a white Canadian, you should probably read this. Getting close to the end, so here's a 10-second review of Games, Agency is Art by C.T. Nguyen. This is what pop philosophy should be. There's a problem with pop philosophy where it panders. It says, hey, philosophy, it's just like Avatar. It's just like Avatar. Guys, come on, it's just like... And this is such great contemporary philosophy because it's a popular subject, but it treats it so seriously, and you can tell that it comes from a place of passion. And I love that it's a career dedicated to this stuff, and it shows so well. And it's contemporary philosophy that cares about the subject matter and is still accessible is so important. 10-second review of The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Burn coffee for fuel in the ships. Burn corn to keep warm. It makes a hot fire. Dump potatoes in the rivers and place guards along the banks to keep the hungry people from fishing them out. Slaughter the pigs and bury them, and let the putrescence drip down into the earth. There is a crime here that goes beyond denunciation. There is a sorrow here that weeping cannot symbolize. There is a failure here that topples all our success. The fertile earth, the straight tree rows, the sturdy trunks and the ripe fruit, and the children dying of pellagra must die because a profit cannot be taken from an orange. And coroners must fill in the certificates, died of malnutrition, because the food must be forced to rot. So this is a more than 10-second review of And the Band Played On by Randy Schultz. And this is too hard to talk about in even the minute that I have here. But I think that in the age of the internet, everyone should be reading more nonfiction. I think that we should know more. And I think that the more interested you are in a topic, the more you should look into it. And I looked into this text, and it's very densely written. It's very informative, and I took it and I went, this is so well written, and now I want to look into it further. And I think that when we're met with articles and posts, it's really important to take on big ideas. And I think that nonfiction and In Practice and The Band Played On are so important because of that. Happy Christmas Eve, everyone, and it's time for more than 10-second review of Danielle Quinn's The Story of Bee. Is The Story of Bee the quote-unquote best book that I read this year? I don't know what that means. Is it the most impactful book that I read this year? Without a doubt. Do I think you should read it? I think you should read his first book first. This is filled with a lot more controversial things. Do I think Ishmael will push you to read this? Yes. Yes, I do. Do I think that reading this will have a similar effect on you? I don't know. I really don't. But I think there are some things that are so monumentally important about these books that I think you should Consider them.